This is what I get for doing this during a live stream. I hate this. See how fat they are? And I don't want to take off all of the elk skin from the end of the horn to get them down narrow enough. So they're coming off. Don't fight. I don't like it. Boy, that glue looks good. You want to know how good that glue is? Working on a bunch of stuff. I screwed up a knife handle, so we're going to have to redo that. I just pulled them off, but man, that glue, boy, does it work. So I pulled it. We're going to do that again, but I ain't going to do it today because I'm going to let it rest for a minute. Think about it. Ponder. So I had a handful of handmade nails in here. I like to keep around a few decorative nails. And a gal came in yesterday and bought every handmade nail I have in here. So I like to keep some around. So I'm going to do some this morning. I finished up this draw knife and now I got to harden it, temper it. So we're doing that. Bunch of projects. Bunch of projects. Put that in there, let that be warm up. Grab a set of tongs. We're going to do some nails. Bunch of little handmade nails but she took all the big ones, so I'm going to do some big long ones. Is the plan this morning. So. So everything, yes, I did go to school for this. I went to farrier school from 1990 to 1992, and then I went back and took the farrier program again for 2 semesters in 96. And in between, I apprenticed with several blacksmiths. Good morning. We're working on some hand forged nails today. We're working on, I got a bunch of stuff. One of the store owners in Cody wants me here in town. He's getting ready for next summer. He's wanting me to do some knives to go in his store. He's got a store in a store called Gun Center. Gene String area. It's called Yellowstone Gift. He wants me to build him some rasp knives. So I'm going to build some knives. So yesterday we annealed this rasp out, and I'm going to try to get 4 or 5 knives out of this big old rasp today. We annealed these ones out yesterday. What's your favorite tool I've ever made? Oh, I've made so many. Here. This is probably my favorite tool I've ever made, and the reason is this is the best axe I've ever made, and my son helped me make this. He struck for me while I made this axe. So this is probably my favorite tool that I've ever made. But I was having a hard time with these the first time I did these handles. I'm always doing something during the live, and they never work out when I'm trying to do 2 things at once. So we're going to do these up. And old Gene might get these. I don't know. We'll see. So these are all annealed out, ready to sharpen, and then I'll harden them back up. I'll temper them back. I got to put my little stamp in them. This is the one that I knocked the handle out of this morning because I didn't like the way it turned out, so we're going to have to rehandle it. But that's a good test. When you have to take the handle off of one of these knives, it's a really good test to test your glue, and I'm using this new kind of glue to put these handles on here. And you can see how good that glue holds. It knocked it, I mean, it took the damn left part of the horn. Left a lot of the horn there. So that tells me this glue is really good. So if nothing else, I learned that I'm happy with this new glue I'm using. Yeah. Yeah. Sure. So a really great lesson when you're forging nails is, especially for beginners, you know, you do these square nails and they're square, you draw them out square. And what happens is your nail ends up being trapezoid shaped instead of square. So you make your punches square, right? But what ends up happening is your stock won't fit in there because it's trapezoid shaped. So when you go to make your nails, especially in the beginning, knock down that corner a little bit and make sure that your nail blank is square before you try to put it into your nail header. And you also notice up that my nail header is domed a little bit. So if you want your nails to all be the same length, put a mark, a memory mark, or they have a name for what that is. I don't know. But anyway, I put a mark on the top of my anvil so I know how much stock to lay over the top of the face of the anvil. So how much stock I start with when I draw the nails out. What wood are you going to use for the handles? I'll probably use elkhorn. I'm doing these for some tourists in town, like touristy people. So I'll probably use elkhorn. And that's how the elkhorn turns out. It's prevalent here. I've got a lot of it. And so I'll probably do something like that. But I do all kinds of wood. I've got a friend of mine in Michigan that brings me out Osage. And then he brings me out a lot of black walnut too. Well, have fun. Have fun. Yeah, those are elkhorns back there. And then this is a buffalo skull, this is a buffalo skull, and then those are elkhorns. Not quite. I'll pull this up just a little more so you guys can get a better elk or a better look at this. Yeah. Like this. Maybe more. So you guys can see what I'm doing. The first ones are always a little wonky because everything's cold. The anvil's cold, all the tools are cold. So this is a big thing I sell this time of year because of Easter. And I don't know why you want to buy nails for Easter, but I sell a lot of these hand forged nails for Easter. So here, I'll show you the one I did. I did this one on a live last week. Did this one on a live last week. And then I've got Here's one with a forged in bit that I did the other day. Well, a couple months ago. Nazis can suck my. So, and here's how and this is how I say this. So, I don't know, maybe you guys will get this inference or not, but growing up, my doctor was a Tuskegee Airman. And that was a group of American, for those that don't know, that was a group of American fighter pilots in World War II, and all the Tuskegee Airmen were black. And my girlfriend is from India. She was born in India, but she was raised over here in Grable. So, no, I'm not. And those guys can eat a dick. You know, I'm at 5,600 feet here in Cody, and so these little Venturi forges, it's pretty hard to get them hot enough to forge well, and so I do a lot of rasp tomahawks because the high carbon steel, it forges a lot easier. Forge well is a lot easier. Well, I'm the last generation of men who remember those guys, right? I'm 53. So all of those World War II vets are gone now. And so when I was busting out, coming into the workforce, becoming a blacksmith, doing carpentry work, working on a framing crew, it was all those World War II vets that were my age now that I was working with. And so I have a lot of respect for those guys. I'm named after my uncle, and my son is named after my uncle, who was a construction worker for Knutson Morrison Construction Company that was on Wake Island when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. So if you don't know the Battle of Wake Island, he spent the entire war during World War II in a concentration camp in Japan, the whole thing. He was kind of my hero. Part of the reason I got into this, he facilitated me doing this a lot. Those are a big nail. You very rarely see nails that big forged. They're a little more challenging to do because they want to bend in the forging. But these are going to be decorative. So yeah, my son's 20, and he missed out on those guys. They really, honestly. So I was around the forgotten generation. So I remember my great grandmother, who was born in 1882. I remember her, and her kids would have been the greatest generation. And then, of course, I was raised by the boomers, which weren't great. And then I'm an Xer. So ironically, my son, who is 20, is a heck of a lot like he's a heck of a lot like my Uncle Jim and a lot like my dad. And I'd like to think that had to do with the way I raised him. I'd like to think that had a lot to do with the way I raised him. Maybe not. Okay, so I've had this draw knife cooking in here, and I need to harden it. I forged this on a live stream a couple of days ago, and I just got it finished up, and I need to harden it. Make sure my handles are still okay after I dropped it. So I'll put it back in there, and we'll heat that up, make sure that blade, and then I'll quench it off. When you're doing these nails, it's a lot easier to make them if you start with a big long piece of steel where you don't have to use a set of tongs. But I'm using a whole bunch of little cut off ends that I have left from other projects. So yeah, well, if she was born in Czechoslovakia in the 1930s, she can tell you all about Nazis. Yeah, there was a lot of atrocities that went on there. Yeah, and then if she didn't escape until the 50s, she got to see the communism. And if your grandma can't talk you out of communism after being in Czechoslovakia in the 40s and 50s, nobody can. Now, you don't want to bang on these when they're cold too much because you'll split the ends out. So you ought to hit them while they're hot. I am not going to heat this oil up. Not going to take the time to heat it. It's smoky, and I'm not going to heat it up. But generally, you would heat that oil up a little bit. But I know this steel, so I made this knife, this draw knife, out of a lawnmower blade, and I'm pretty sure that's a water quench steel. But I'm going to use this. I'm going to use the oil. Yeah, no. I made my nail header out of a piece of truck spring. If you're going to make a nail header out of a piece of mild steel, you got to make them really thick, or else you won't get many nails out of it. So there, that's hardened up. Now, then I'll have to clean that up and we'll temper it back. Okay, so here's a little safety tip for you guys. This is my oil quenching tank. This is my oil quenching tank. It's an old cream can. So back in the day, when farmers actually milked cows and sold it to a creamery, they would separate the cream off the milk and they would put them in one of these cans, and then every day or two, the creamery would come around and they'd pick up these cans. Generally, you'd have your brand on them or your name on them, so they'd know. So when they got back to the creamery, you'd get credit for selling your cream or your milk. Sometimes you'd sell cream, sometimes you'd sell milk, sometimes you'd sell both. But they're steel, and when you're quenching knives or whatever kind of tools that you're quenching in oil, when that oil gets up to 220 degrees, it'll catch on fire. Well, you do not want to have hot oil in a glass jar or in a plastic bucket. You want to have it in metal so it doesn't melt. So, and you also want to have a lid. So when that oil does flash up and the flames are coming out of here and it's rolling smoke like a diesel truck, you can take the lid and you can drop the lid on there and you can put it out. Because it's about the only way that you're going to get an oil fire out. Because you can't use water. Because if you dump water in that hot oil, now you've got a real mess. So you can make them, you can weld them, you can weld tubes. A lot of guys use tubes. I've seen guys use old military cans, but this is the best thing I've ever found for quenching, for a quench tank. It's deep, and so you can get a long knife in there. You can get long tools in there to quench them. I'm going to sharpen this hardy up a little bit. It's a little dull. You don't need it razor sharp, but you want it fairly sharp. Yeah, I'll show you. So that's all that is a piece of leaf spring. You can see how I domed it up, and then the inside is concave. And you want to back punch the bottom side of that. You don't have to weld a handle on there. You can draw a handle out, but it's just, for me, it was just easier to weld a handle on it. But once you weld on that hardened steel like that, if you're going to weld on it, you need to take the whole thing and throw it back in the forge and then retemper it, because what happens is you'll get you'll get a heat shunt in here and you'll break your handle off if you don't, because it builds up so much heat in such a little space. So you gotta take everything back and reharden it, the whole thing. A brewer's keg will work. A brewer's keg will work, but you want to make damn sure that you got a lid that you can snuff it out. And of course, you can't use a plastic lid. You got to have a metal lid too. Because I'm going to tell you something. I've seen some bad wrecks. I was in a shop one day down in Salt Lake, and these guys were making hammerheads, and they were quenching those hammerheads in that oil. And it don't take very many hammerheads to get 5 gallons of oil superheated. They did about 7 hammerheads in that oil. The bucket melted. The oil went all over the floor, and the guy jumped back and he dropped the hammer, and the hammer got on the oil, and it caught the whole 5 gallons on fire across the floor of the shop. And you want to talk about hard to get out? You better have a good fire extinguisher, a chemical fire extinguisher. Because if you go out there and you just throw your quench tank with water on there, now you got a big mess. So I always find it a lot easier, and now I've done thousands of knives. I really have a hard time quenching a blade like that. Invariably, I always end up with my blade gets a warp in it if I do that. I have much better luck if I plunge my blades in up and down, and then I don't have nearly as much warpage. That's just my experience. I've got this is a huge nail header. It's giant. That's a big nail. Most of your nail headers are about that size. Little. And of course, to make a nail header, you got to make a punch first, or a pritchel. So you make a pritchel, heat up your steel, you punch it. You put what I do is I put my nail header over my hardy hole, and I'll set it down with the rounding head of my hammer. So I'll do that, and then that gives you a nice convex shape. That way it's a lot easier to get to the edge of your nail head when you do that. If your nail head is flat, I don't think your nail turns out as good. Let me see if I got some small nails. Yeah. And I said this earlier, but maybe you weren't on yet. So when you forge those nails out, a lot of times, especially with beginner smiths, you can't see it, but your nail will become trapezoid shaped. and you'll have a hard time getting it in your nail header. So what you do is you turn your nail up with your corner up and you knock the corners down. And that takes your trapezoid shape, it's like this, and it squares it back up so your faces are square. Right? Instead of having your angles shaped like this, if you tip that like that and hit here on your anvil, now that knocks that corner down and it squares everything back up again, and it'll fit in your square nail header better. But the trick, really the best trick, is making sure you got a good corner on your anvil, and when you're making the shoulder on that nail, I'll see if I can show you. So see, I whack that off the center, and now that nail is trapezoid shaped. It's not square anymore. And you'll have a heck of a time getting that sucker in your nail header. So what I'll do is I'll take that long side and I'll come in here and I'll knock it down. Then I'll just leave the littlest bit so I can wring that off in the nail header. But if you look careful, right up behind the head is actually thinner than the shank, and that will help keep your nail from sticking in your nail header. I don't know, I probably need to draw this one down a little bit. So see, it might be a little sticky here, and that's okay, but you don't want it sticking in here at all. You want to make that smaller. So your nail's not actually a straight taper. I make where the shoulder is just a little smaller, and that sure helps get it out of the nail header better. I kind of exaggerated that because I wanted to show you. You know, it ain't no big deal if they're a little crooked because you can always straighten them out after they cool off. Right, because it will swell a little bit. And what happens is as you use your nail header and it gets hot, of course it expands a little bit. So in between nails, your nail header is changing a little bit. And so you don't want it to be the little bit tight. And it's a pain in the butt to get nails stuck in your nail header, because then you got to try to get them out of there once they're stuck in there. So you don't want to do that. You definitely don't want to do that. Can I test it? Yep. So generally I would have this in another tool, so I wouldn't have to move it off back and forth. Occasionally you're going to make a mistake and you're going to wring this sucker off. See if I can do it like that. You're going to say, oops, I cut it. Well, it ain't a big deal. You just put that in your cord, but you got to have tongs. This is where you got to have good tongs to do that. Well, you make 1,000 nails. Nails and hoof picks. Nails and hoof picks, and now I'm 36 years. I started blacksmithing. I've been doing metalwork since the mid 80s, but I started blacksmithing in 1990. If you want to watch me build these, I've done 100 videos on these, so you can go back to the channel and here's some I do. See, these are the stuff, when I'm working on other projects, I always throw some of these in, and that way, in between whatever I'm working on, I could be working on this stuff. But I've kind of got the leaf thing. I've got a style that I do on the leaf thing that, yeah. So, but if you want to see how I do these, you can go watch my other videos. I don't do too many penny scrolls. They don't sell as good as the leaves, but I do it. And when you get good, you can do something like that. Yeah, you do 1,000 leaves. But I tell everybody the first thing you need to learn how to do is make chisels and make tongs. Don't screw around. Don't be farting around don't be farting around with railroad spikes. Make yourself some tongs. Yeah. Well, see, I made myself this tool. No, let's see. I might have another one in here. Coil spring works great. That 51 series steel, virtually all of my tools are either made out of that or made out of sucker. There's a lot of guys on YouTube that do blacksmithing. I don't think there's nearly as many. I don't think there's too many on there that do as much hammer time as I do. Just saying. I have a power hammer. I've got one built. I got the trail hammer, but I stand right here a lot. And the proof is, look at how many live streams I do. If I'm not forging any more than just on the live stream, I'm doing 2 hours of forging a day. And there's the proof. 53 years old. So generally what I would do, and this is right out of, but I would probably put this in this place. And that would save, if I'm doing a bunch of them, that would save me from moving tools back and forth. That's the one we cut off. See, when I'm so old that when I started, there was no internet. I was the internet. I started posting on YouTube 20 years ago. No, it's all good. Monopolize the chat. It just makes it, the more engagement I get, the better. And you ask questions that other people don't know to ask. So you're helping. I don't know if you were on one. So I've got I put a soapstone mark on there. And so when I pull that material out of the forge, I know how much material to start with, for my nails are relatively the same size. And here's something that a lot of people don't know. And if you're planning on doing this, this is one thing that every blacksmith should do. And if you've been, and I learned it from doing farrier work for years and years, because those guys, a lot of those guys are shaping cold shoes. I never leave my handles round. I square up my handles, and it will save you from getting tendonitis. You don't have to squeeze that hammer so much. It just finds a natural place in your hand. A lot of times you'll see me swinging, and I'll be like that. And that's almost impossible to do with a round-handled hammer. And you notice that this handle is really, really long. So traditionally, you want your hammer handle to be that long. But I learned the big long handle thing from doing farrier work. I can shorten up on it. If I really want to get after something, I can get some leverage. And if you're only going to own one style of hammer, get one of these. Screw those cross beams. Screw those hammers that aren't balanced. These are like $80. These are diamonds. They're made in America. They're still made in America. Yeah. But traditionally, most blacksmiths, traditionally trained blacksmiths, like German trained blacksmiths, they'll say your handle should only be that long. You should be able to bend your arm in the crook of your arm and your hammer still stand. Do not waste your money on one of these. These are a waste. This is ridiculous. I paid $200 for this hammer 20 years ago. Do not do that. It's ridiculous. You're better off to have something like that. This is a 36 ounce. That's my daily driver. If I'm doing something a little more delicate, once in a while I'll use this hammer because it's square. And so once you get some good hammer control, you can get right in there against something that you can't do with a round-faced hammer. So I'll use that. But I hate forging with a cross-peen hammer, just as far as forging goes. The biggest hammer I will swing is this. And this is the one I use when I really got to move some material. And this is about 5.5 or 6 pounds. And I think originally it was probably a stonemason's hammer. They use these for cutting granite. But but you're not going to swing this all day. You'll break yourself. Don't let your ego, your hubris get ahead of you. But I do use this occasionally, but very sparingly. When you get a striker, and one of these days you'll probably be in a position where you're striking for somebody, or you're going to need a striker to strike for you. Be very careful striking with a hammer with a flat face on it, because you're coming down on tops of tools, and it's very easy to miss hit and your tool goes flying. When I'm striking or I'm having my son strike, this is the hammer I use. See how the faces are round? So when you're hammering on a tool, you actually get more surface area. If you use a hammer with a flat face on it, you have to hit a little off, tool will go flying. This is a really good size for a striker because it's a 10-pounder. And this hammer was probably built in about 1915 or something, in the heyday of it, the last of the blacksmiths. This hammer was made. It was made by a company called Samson. I guess it's an 8-pounder. But this is a good, and then when you buy a sledgehammer, like a regular sledgehammer, see how long the handles are? See how much I've cut off? I've cut a well over a foot off of that handle. When you're striking, when you swing a hammer by yourself, you don't swing it like you don't have a baseball swing. When you're striking, you actually put your offhand above your dominant hand. And generally you would strike like that versus this way. It's whatever's comfortable, but you don't want to have too much handle when you have a striker. You want your help to be close to the work. You don't want to have to stand out there 4 feet from the anvil. A 13-pound is a huge hammer. 13-pound. This is I think this is a 12. I think that's a 12. And I have a 15. I have a 15 on the treadle hammer. Yeah. Yeah. Some of those old hammers, not so much the big hammers, but there was a time in the late 60s through the 70s when we first started getting stuff from China that a lot of those hammers will cast, and you want to be careful using those. They will spall bad. When I was shoeing horses and doing clinics with Jay Sharp, he said that if you were standing properly over your anvil and you were striking and you missed your material and the hammer bounced up, if you were in the proper position, your hammer would hit you right between the eyes. If you were standing in the proper position. That's what he always said. And I have done that. End of the day, you're tired, you're trying to get something done, you miss, and the hammer come right back and go, whack, back in. It'll ring your bell. Yeah. Well, this is weird because of the way the camera is, it makes me look like I'm left-handed. And I'm not left-handed, I'm right-handed, but it's just the way that the camera ports. This anvil isn't great because I've rebuilt it a couple of times. This is a 250-pound hay button, but as far as I'm concerned, they were the best anvils ever made. If I didn't have if I didn't have 3 hay buttons, I'd have a Trent. And as far as new made anvils, if I was going to get a new anvil, I'd get one of those JHM Journeyman round horn anvils. You're going to pay about $800 for one, but it'll last you your whole life. You'll never have to buy another one. Got to have good edges on your anvil in order to get that nice. Because if you've got a bunch of ragged edge on your anvil, you won't get a nice shoulder, and invariably your work is, you screw up your work. And Peter Wright's a good anvil. They were made in England. I've owned several. I've owned several Peter Wrights over the years. The trouble that I have had with most of them is I have seen them. I've seen more delaminated faces on Peter Wrights than I have on other anvils. And maybe that's because they're older. Because Peter Wright, they were an old company, and part of the reason that Peter Wrights were so ubiquitous in the United States is because they would put them on the ships, on the sailing ships when they were coming to the United States. All those sailing ships had ballast in the bottom of the ship, and generally what they would use for ballast is rock. Well, so instead of putting rock as ballast in the bottom of the ship, they'd use anvils. Yeah, on a sailing ship, because you're so top heavy because of the sails, your ship had a tendency to tip over. So what they would do is they'd put everything heavy, all the heavy cargo, they'd put on the very, very, very lowest bottom of the ship. Well, if you didn't have enough weight, your ship would tip over. So a lot of times they put rock in the very bottom of the ship. But they got paid for shipping if they took the rock out and put anvils in there. If you want to know about the history of anvils in America, there's a book called Anvils in America by Richard Postman. And it is the omnibus book about blacksmith anvils in America. He covers every American maker. He's got the serial numbers in there. Like these hey buttons like this, they have a serial number. I know this anvil was made in 1925. I got a 100-pounder over here, and I know it was made in 1915 because they have serial numbers on them. Hay Budden was in Brooklyn, New York. I think the foundry burnt down about 1928, the last time. But Hay Budden made something like 180,000 anvils from 1885 or 86 to 1925. Just a second. So these hardback editions, like this one, they're like $100 now. It's by Richard Postman, Anvils in America. And they have reprinted these in softback now. But if you can find one of these hardbound ones on eBay, you're going to pay $100 for it. Or Amazon. You might be able to find them on Amazon. But you can see that it's one of my treasured possessions. You want something to be clean if you want something to be clean in a blacksmith shop, you better cover it up. That is an acceptable nail for me. That's what I want them to look like. Before the Civil War, yeah, I'm just doing a decorative head on it. I'm not getting, you could get real fancy and, do equidistant strikes on there, but I'm not. I'm just, it's funny. I sell a lot of these this time of year uh, for Easter, which I find really weird, but whatever. I like money, so that's what I make. So pretty much prior to the Civil War, virtually every nail was made this way. Yeah. Prior to the Civil War, every nail was made this way. Around 1855 or something like that, a man by the name of Capewell came up with a way to mass produce nails. But all over England, in most countries, nail production was controlled by the government. Have you ever heard the poem, for the want of a nail, the shoe was lost. For the want of a shoe, the horse was lost. For the want of a horse, the soldier was lost. For the want of a soldier, the battle was lost. For the want of the battle, the war was lost. It's an old, all for the want of a horseshoe nail. That's how that ends. So horseshoe nails were controlled in most countries by the government. And so they were really strictly regulated. And guys that made nails, maybe you know somebody whose last name is Naylor. Well, their name was Naylor because their family made nails. So anyway, if a war broke out, the government would gather up all the guys that made nails and they would force them to make nails for horseshoes because of course they wear out and you got to have, you can reforge that, you can reforge everything. You can reforge the shoes into other horseshoes, but you can't replace the nails. So you got to have new nails. And so there was for years in America, there were guys who would just go around on the train. They had a nailer's anvil. They would bring the stock with them and they would make nails for blacksmiths. So they would show up to your shop. They'd stay 3 days. They'd build you all the horseshoe nails you needed for the whole year. And that way you didn't have to build horseshoe nails. You could just shoe horses. Yeah. I fucked that one up. I mean, I screwed that one up. Me screwing around talking to you guys. I must have mishit that. And I must have mishit it. And I put a big notch in the side of the nail. The good thing is it doesn't cost me nothing but a little time. Blacksmithing in real life. I've been at it since about 5. Greetings from Cody. I'm gonna go get some more coffee. So much of this is muscle memory after you do a bunch of them. See, that one was binding a little. So I'm gonna go in there, I'm gonna knock my corners down. Try it again. Still binding up. I'm trying to get these ones a little more pretty. Seeing how they won't be driven in a piece of wood and you won't be able to see the shank. Fort Bridger. You know, I've wanted to do the rendezvous for years, and I've been twice, but I've never set up down there, and I've always wanted to do it. I was in Evanston in July when the big boy steam engine went through, and my son and I went down and we set up for 2 days down there when the big boy came through. We had a lot of fun down there, but I've always wanted to do it. If you get good at these, you can make them look like jewelry. I'm real through with it. There we go. Now we're talking. Maybe you can see I did just some little. Yeah, Amazon has that book for $280. Now you see why I got it wrapped in a plastic bag. and I don't loan it out. I don't loan it out because I don't want all those greasy dick beaters on there, putting their smudgy Blacksmith fingerprints on it. Yeah, I paid 80. I think I paid $80 for that one about 10 years ago. So that just shows you. And it was brand new, still in the plastic when I got it. This is going to be the last now, but I got a ton of other stuff I'm working on. Why don't we, while that's heating up, I'll show you some of my work. This is the typical style, the typical quality that I do. There's guys out there that do them way better than me, but I don't specialize in knife making. I'm a blacksmith. We're making nails, but I'm showing off my work right now. And then my friend Joel Gomez does my sheaths for me. And this is a stock removal. I bought these billets. They're Damascus. I bought them from a guy out in Alabama that just specializes doing Damascus. These were kind of a custom order. That's Elkhorn. Now I do my guards a little different than a lot of guys do. So I like to have more thickness in my handles. And I hate to have a tapered shaped handle. And so I split my guards and then I rivet them on. Yeah, so thank you. I do a couple hundred knives a year. Knives and knife shaped objects. So this is Osage. I don't bother with it. I don't bother with it. I need to pop. These ones haven't been buffed up yet. I need to buff up and re-etch the handles or the blades. It's the last thing I do before they leave the shop. But I don't know. I'm sure there's some guys out there that do their guards that way, but that's how I do mine. See, I split it and then I slide them on and then they're pinned. If you look real careful, you can see the brass pins in there. And then I got one more to show you. This was a custom order I did for a guy, and I don't do custom work, but he's a friend of mine from the Elks Club. He wanted a knife from me for his brother. And so I did this one. That's Elkhorn. And Joel went all out on the sheath. I think I'm running out of propane. Get too much head, it gets pretty challenging to do a nice head. I'm working on a bunch of different stuff. Here's another one I'm working on. This one will get an Elkhorn handle when I get done with it. Now let's see if I can do this without screwing this one up. Now let's see how consistent they are. Let me go shut this porch off. So, of course, you're always trying to check how consistent your length is, right? So, not bad. Not bad. They'll work. Okay. Now, I'll show you some of the other stuff I do. I hope the guy from Wyoming is still here because he's going to get a kick out of this. So if the guy from Fort Bridger's still here, he'll get a kick out of this. So this is from South Pass. This was in one of the mine dumps up on South Pass in July. My son and I, on our way back, we stopped at South Pass for one night and camped. Check this out. I don't know if that's showing up on camera or not. Isn't that cool? So I'm selling strikers made in Wyoming with, that's got to be some kind of chert or something, from Wyoming. It's so funny. This is a piece of jasper from over in 9 County. It came from, I picked this one up out of the driveway. So this actually came out of the driveway here. And this is my pocket kit. It's in your pocket. So there's my char cloth. Here's my little tiny flint striker. You can put that flint in your hand like that. You got to get a hold of that pretty good. Got to hit it just right. It's pretty hard. It's pretty small, hard to get a hold of. There it goes. So that's my little mini flint striker that I made for my little mini flint striker kit, fire starter kit. We should probably talk about these. So these are the kind of a traditional flint striker. That's kind of the traditional shape. You see some L-shaped ones, but I hate those. I hate those L-shaped flint strikers. I'm always cutting myself with that sucker. My favorite ones are these French style ones. And this is the ones that I forge mostly. It's like this. And they spark really good. And the good thing is you can put a lanyard on it. I've done enough of them that I got the temper. I know how to get the temper on them. And of course, a lot of it is the material you use. This material out of South Pass seems to work really good. Look. You know, when you do something for 35 or 36 years, you better figure it out. I even do a little bit of artwork once in a while. So anyway, I'm gonna have to change my propane tank out. I gotta weld up a bunch of hat racks today. If you guys are feeling generous, you might slip over to the Etsy store and just like some stuff. You don't have to buy nothing, but I know how the economy is now. But if you could go over there, there's a link in my bio, or just Google it, Cody Ironworks, and just go like some stuff. That would be great. Because every time you get a little engagement on my Etsy store, more people see it. And Etsy is terrible about trying to advertise for me. So all of that comes from, all those sales come from my own social media and stuff. So anybody else got any questions? Need to nap a new edge on your shirt. Yeah, probably. You know, so small. If I tried to break a clean edge off on it, I wouldn't even be able to hold on to it. Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm just almost 3,000 sales on the Etsy store. So. The Green-Eyed Gypsy. Next time I come through there, I'll stop. I got a friend of mine who's on the city council in Evanston. So I try to get down there once in a while. And then my son's mother lives in Park City. So if he wants to go see her, we go down, and then I stay in Evanston, and he goes on down to Park City to visit his mother. So I got trapped in Fort Bridger one time. When I was moving to Park City, and this has been 25 years ago, the transmission went out on my pickup in Lyman, and it was middle of winter, and I got stuck there for about 4 days while we fixed it. Well, I thank you very much. I appreciate you too. Thanks. I'm going to try to get some merch up. It's just I'm so busy and I'm so bad at that stuff. Like, I want to do some of these coffee cups. Yeah, those three sisters are a bitch. That ain't nothing to mess around with. Especially when you were driving a 1976 Chevy pickup, pulling a big old horse trailer full of stuff with a 350 motor in it. It was a pull back then. Hola, amigo, ¿qué pasa? ¿Dónde vive? En Cody, Wyoming, Estados Unidos. So anyway, I'm going to do some t-shirts and stuff up. So, cause I know not everybody needs wall hooks and the shit I build, but I'm going to do some stickers, and I'm going to get them on the Etsy store one of these days when I get caught up around here a little bit. So. Nuevo Leon. Found me a little Tejanita, and she called me from Nuevo Leon. She said, send me some more money so I can come back home. Texas tornadoes. Freddie Fender. Flocky E. Jimenez. Well, I got a bunch of welding to do, and I could move the camera over there, but I don't know if you guys would appreciate it. Saludos. Para mi esposa, Carmen. She belonged to El Diablo. He can have her. I don't want her anymore. All right, well, I'm going to get set up. I might come back live in a little bit. I got to change out the tank for the forge. I got to weld up a bunch of hat rack components. I got to get to the post office by noon this morning. This is blacksmithing in real life around here. So that's this is me every day. I will try to take at least half of tomorrow off. But it's pretty much 6 or 6.5 days a week in this shop. So thanks everybody. I really appreciate everybody coming in and sticking around and seeing the stuff. Really appreciate it. Thanks for all the likes. I hope I earned a couple of subscriptions. You know, I'm giving out 35 years of knowledge for nothing on YouTube. And these live streams are nothing. They pay nothing. These are absolutely for free. I get no advertisement revenue, nothing off of these live streams. So if you want to support me, go watch some of my other videos, because it's I really get banged on these. So I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you very much. And if you really want to support me, go buy some hat racks or something from the Etsy store. That'd be really great. Like that one right there. Or the gun racks. Or the wall hooks. All right, everybody. I'll subscribe and hit the button, and then when I come back live, you'll know that I'm on again. It sure beats the hell out of watching the news lately. Thank you, man. Appreciate it, everybody. Have a great day if I don't talk to you later.